Before we let you go, you're also the voice of the Michigan Wolverines basketball team. Got a kind of an important game coming up. Take us through Michigan versus Florida State, Sweet 16. What do you see? What are the keys for the Wolverines to advance there?
Well, if the Wolverines are going to advance, hopefully it's a lot less stressful than that game against LSU was, because that, I think, took years off my life. What I think LSU did really well, what Florida State might try to exploit, is trying to get Michigan more in that transition game. Michigan does have the ability and the legs to be able to run and do that, but they also have the ability to play in the half-court game. And I know that obviously this is Cleveland production here. So if you look back to their game against Ohio State down at the Schottenstein Center, I thought that was probably the best representation of what Michigan basketball is. They have the ability to score, they have the ability to get stops, and they match up pretty well against everybody. For Florida State, they're a long, athletic team, and I think that they'll look to the LSU tape to try to find some ways to exploit it. If you're Michigan, Franz Wagner and Hunter Dickinson, those guys are the key. Isaiah Livers expected to be out with the stress injury with his foot once again, so you want to get Hunter Dickinson, the fabulous freshman, going early. Franz Wagner's got a big game. He wasn't great in the first half against LSU. He definitely turned it up in the second half. I think he finished with like 15 points, so they're going to need big production out of him. And then a guy off the bench by the name of Sean D. Brown Jr., he plays with the mentality of a junkyard dog. He ended up scoring 21 points against LSU. He was key. Without him, Michigan doesn't win that game. So it's going to be Hunter, Franz, and then Sean D. off the bench for the Maize and Blue.
How are the Wolverines feeling confidence-wise? The number one seed, I know they got knocked off in the Big Ten tournament, but looked pretty good first couple rounds.
I think that the first round matchup was good against Texas Southern, a nice boring, 1 versus 16 game, like kind of what we expected. LSU was a little bit of a scare, and I think that all Michigan fans right now are, I wouldn't say we're clutching our pearls, but I think that we're nervous just because without Isaiah Livers on the floor, you're losing a guy that could go off for 20 points on any given night. And because they've substituted Brandon Johns Jr., who's more of a traditional power forward, versus Isaiah, who can play basically 2, 3, or 4 if they want him to. Because Brandon Johns and Hunter Dickinson are so large and their games are so close to the basket, that has really clogged up the paint, which is where Franz Wagner, he makes his money, slashing and being able to take the ball to the rim. So it's kind of congested things a little bit in the painted area. So I think that Michigan fans are somewhat confident. Don't believe anything you see on Twitter. We're nervous, and we should be. It's the tournament time. It's 40 minutes. One bounce doesn't go your way, and who knows what can happen.